Guess who's back, everyone? Guess who it is?
Bobo?
It's your favorite co-star.
Hi!
Brian! Brian's back.
Yay.
He's been here for... When did you arrive? He's been here for a while, let's just say that.
Yeah.
He gifted me this beautiful vintage Gucci headscarf,
Which has become a bit of a tradition.
It has. But let's make this the year. Let's make this the year or the month or whatever that...
You've got 6 months to go.
Yeah, exactly. No, let's make this the time that you actually move forward with your Italian. How many years have you been saying, oh, I'd really love to, get better in Italian, or I'd really love to learn Italian, and maybe you've been holidaying here for many years, and
but why wouldn't you want to learn the best language in the world?
Yeah, exactly. I've never filmed in a hammock before, so I don't know how this is going to work, but it's just the coolest spot because it's so hot.
So nice. And can you see the view? Oh my gosh, it's the best. I've had many a nap here.
Yeah. The reason that Brian is the perfect person for this video is because so many of you ask me, how long does it take to get fluent, or how long does it take to feel comfortable in Italian? And we have here, I suppose, two different experiences though, because I'm obviously lived in Italy for a long time, but you live mostly in Australia.
Yes.
But,
and I don't really get to practice my Italian, but I work hard to learn it.
Yeah. You can say, but if you're not in the country, then what can you do? And I think Brian's a great example of, actually, you can do a lot.
Yeah, you can. And you never stop learning.
And the other thing is, too, that neither of us have Italian heritage. And I think that can be, hopefully, quite motivating, because it's easy to pick up a language if you've been around it since childhood, if you've had the la nonna and la zia and everyone using little pieces with you, even dialect. But both of us just started from scratch with no
helping hand of heritage. Yeah,
and actually even I as well learnt it before I moved to Italy. So if we can do it, you can do it, because we just honestly both got to a stage where we're comfortable in Italian. What would you say your level is?
I would say I'm intermediate and getting better, but I think if I lived here I'd be a lot more comfortable and confident. But yeah, I never think I'm fluent. Some people say, oh, Brian's fluent in Italian. I'm like, no, far from it. Yeah. And you'll hear about that shortly.
And me either. But I think I suppose what everyone's aiming for is not fluency, but just that level of ease where you can joke, where you can interact, and where you can negotiate a holiday in Italy. We can speak from our experience of like where we saw our progress happening,
where it dipped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and or what made us feel. Sorry, did you just get bitten on the side of your eye? Did it?
No, I've got an allergy.
Oh no!
And I'm crying. Is there something? Am I bleeding?
No.
I've got an allergy.
I thought it was the Zanzara.
I do have Zanzara bites, so.
I wonder if we should move in closer. Would you like it closer, or perhaps you're...
Well, I don't want them to see this mark on my eye now.
Okay, fine. We'll leave it at that. All right. Are you changing position?
No, I don't know. What do you think?
Number 1, do you have commitment issues? Don't casually date Italian.
You're wondering, why have I been on and off learning Italian for years and not making any progress? Why are you not getting better? Why does it all feel so overwhelming? One of the reasons could be, say pigro, no. No, one of the reasons could be, if we have to be really honest, so many people are asking, how do you get to that stage where you can just feel really free? We are language geeks. We both studied really, really hard. We think about language all the time. And
also, I work as a flight attendant, and I know thank you in, I think, 25 languages.
Oh.
Just because I want to know it. I've taught myself to know it.
Yeah.
If I meet a Korean, I ask them, how do they say thank you? And 감사합니다. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's geeky.
Yeah.
Not many people do things like that. So
and then
that's
before,
an example.
and before Italian, Brian learned Indonesian.
Mm-hmm.
I learned Spanish and Japanese. We both have a love of language, but we really spend a lot of time, and it's not the fun stuff. It's not like, oh, I spend so much time on holiday in Italy. It's the boring, just alone in your bedroom. Yeah, exactly. We both saw our progress after we did just that solitary confinement at home.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can be a good news, because what it means is that, no, you're not bad at languages. You're just bad at committing.
Yeah. Have a set goal of what I'm going to do this week by the end of the month, by the end of 6 months, so that you can see your progress, and also kind of kick yourself if you don't make it, because I think you're your own worst enemy by procrastinating. And also it's not going to fall in your brain and start happening for you unless you put in that work.
You're going to see your level of comprehension sort of go like this, even go like this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time I find when people first start learning Italian, they're all excited, and then they take their first class, or they download the app and do it a few times or something, and then they take a real dip, don't you see? And they get really depressed.
Or they start talking to an Italian too soon, maybe.
Exactly.
And they go, oh my God, I don't understand anything.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's all here,
and
but
people
you
always
can't
say,
get it out.
or like your fiance said the other day, he said, oh, I think I speak culinary Italian because I know all the food words.
Yeah.
And that can make you feel really great. And then when you sit down to learn the grammar, you think, oh dear.
Yeah.
and then I find people really tend to give up at that point, because then once you begin, it can be really depressing to say, wow, there's actually so much I don't know. And yet, if you continue past that point, you'll find your language will. This is my experience. I don't know what yours is, but I think it will have dips, and then you come up again, and then suddenly and it goes, and it's just like that all the time. But you need to be aware that just because you're feeling totally overwhelmed doesn't mean that in 2 weeks' time, with proper commitment, you will feel you will see that progress happen. And I know that my parents, for example, have started trying to learn Italian, and they were just, my mother said, I don't know how you did it. I mean, it's just so much to take in, and so many verbs, and the masculine and feminine, which we're not used to in English. But
the good news is all the resources are there, and they're there for free.
Yeah.
Like your YouTube is amazing for teaching languages.
Yeah.
One, you can hear them, and it's also usually a teacher teaching you, so they know how to construct the lesson. And then you have potentially 10 odd teachers so you can pick and choose how someone will explain something in a better way than the other.
Number 2, you can cheat on your teacher.
It's good to have a variety, because you can have one teacher who's making it's very good and they're Italian, but they're making it feel a little bit overwhelming.
Daunting, yeah.
And just because they're naturally, as they should, going into the grammar, and I think you always need that balance. You need a balance of listening and to just Italian out in the world, in reading it in a magazine, in a film, whatever, and then also following someone as well. Would you say? Yes,
I totally agree. And also some people's voices might sound better to you than others, you know. It's definitely the case. Like, you have to be engaged in the learning, otherwise you won't learn it.
Yeah, and some accents are actually, I mean, everyone is so different, whether you're learning from a Roman, whether you're learning from a Florentine, and so you might find it, I mean, even your fiancé was saying that he finds Guido quite hard to understand, you know? And then some others.
Southerners as well.
Yeah, so
very different.
I think if you try to sort of consume a diverse range of resources, then you won't find yourself just being, oh, well, I don't understand this one teacher, so I must be really bad at Italian.
Not true. Non è vero.
Number 3, don't wait to be in Italy.
People will probably want to know, do you remember like how long it took you though to get to the point where you felt like, do you remember when you first started learning?
I would say I seriously started learning when I'd made the decision to move to Rome for 3 months. And so I gave myself 6 months to learn.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, but I didn't feel confident when I got to Rome, but I had a really good base of somewhere to start. And that's when we discussed earlier, you'll feel yourself get to this point and then all of a sudden go like that. So for the 6 months I was climbing and getting what I thought a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then I got to Rome and I went, and I started to realize, oh, people actually talk really fast and I have to really pick that up. So I think I was very book smart, and then it dropped, and then over the 3 months it started to climb up again.
Right, yeah.
And then I had a whole long time of not studying at all, and then had to get back into it because we got in a bit of a rut, you know.
But I think also when we talk about committing, I mean, I remember with this book, The 501 Verbs, which I always talk about. It's a
very good book.
Yeah, and I recommended it to you before you were moving. And I remember before I moved to Italy, just picking a verb a night and studying it. And then I would have whoever was near me. I think I went to stay with my parents for a little bit, and just after dinner, my mother just went down and tested me on them, and just to going through. And even if someone, I mean, she doesn't speak Italian, but she could see, because Italian's phonetic, it's quite easy to have a non-Italian speaker work with you and test you, and really just go through one verb a night. I mean, just like brushing your teeth, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to set aside 2 hours of study every day or something. No. But if you just did one verb a night and be tested, and that's something that I think really helps, because you can be writing everything down, but until you're testing yourself, you have no idea what's actually been retained.
Well, it's important to write it down, because we're discussing about apps and how you're often tested on screen. Yeah. But in my case, I wrote out all my fundamental verbs, which I thought were really important. I wrote down the present tense of each one of those, and and then the past tense, and I had them stuck all over my walls in my bedroom, in the bathroom, so that I was constantly looking at them. And I'd sometimes even be trying to fall asleep, and I'd go, what's potato in the voy again? And I had to get up out of bed to go and find it, because I wouldn't be able to fall asleep.
You're so cute. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's exactly, and even when my parents were staying here with us, I went all over their little cottage and put Post-it notes on everything. So on the fridge, on the ceiling, and then I just put some where they do the washing up, just above the on the piattaia. I put just a fa caldo and some little phrases that they could use, and I think it helps just to have it around you. Stick it on the mirror in the bathroom, and all of just so that you're surrounded by it in a passive way, as well as when you're actually applying yourself. No,
absolutely.
And so 6 months. That's encouraging.
Months. Well, no, well, like I said, I wasn't conversational at the time. I thought I was. Like, I could probably if it was slowly. Yeah. But then going to the market, or going to the supermarket, and to the butcher, and to the flower man, all these little things, slowly then you start to leave those conversations and go, oh, I did it.
Yeah. Number 4, our 10 most useful verbs.
If you have to just commit to 10 verbs, these are the ones that we use the most. No?
Fare.
So to do. But to do, it can be used in so many different contexts, and you will see if I've done it. I will do it.
I'll make it.
Can you do it? Yeah, can you make it? Exactly. Even if you're going to make a cake, or are you able to make it on time to the station?
Essere.
To be.
It's so important because you'll find out you use this for past tense in several types of verbs as well.
Yeah.
Dovere.
So dovere can be should, or I have to.
Must.
Must. Yeah, must as well. Yeah. And I think it also helps because if people are giving you advice, even if you're just on holiday, you need to wait at this station, or you must put the rubbish in this bin, or I
must go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I must.
Next one. Potere
is can. And
able to.
Able to, yeah. And if you're talking about ability, I think that's quite important. If someone's always going to ask you, are you able to drive? Are you able to speak Italian?
Can I sit here? Can I smoke here?
Yeah.
You know?
Can I move past you?
Yeah.
Can I take this table? Do you mind if I steal a chair?
Can I take a photo? You know, when you're in shops, I always say, posso?
Yeah.
You know, can I? And they're like, certo, prego.
Exactly.
It's such a useful verb.
If you want to be polite.
Yes, and we always do.
And I'll just link on screen now a previous episode of Being Polite in Italian. Next one is
andare.
To go. And this is obviously important when you're traveling because you want to ask, where should we go? Can we go into town on foot?
How did it go?
How did it go? Yeah. How's it going?
Yeah. And then in past tense, I went. You know. There's so much to learn.
When your sort of host is saying, "Oh, have you been to the Amalfi Coast?" Yes, I went last year. Did
Come
you?
andata?
Yeah. How did it go? Yeah.
Parlare.
Yeah. I always remember. I had. I can't remember who it was. Well, I think it was an ex that said to me, "You've got to be so careful with parlare. Don't forget the first R, because otherwise it just sounds like palla, which is ball or balls." Che palle. Parlare. See, and that just because everyone obviously will be asking you about whether you speak Italian.
Or you might say, I don't speak well, or, you know, there's so many things. Stare.
This is really great, not to be confused with essere, to be, but this is in the moment, and often we will use the ing. So, I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm eating.
Gerundio.
Yeah, exactly, the gerund. Is this getting too confusing for them?
No, I don't think so. I actually think stare was one of the most important verbs I learned because everyone knows.
It's like picking your favourite child.
No, because it's like come stai. Everyone knew that. I remember people saying, no, you have to use come sta in this instance because their person's older. So I think everyone's already heard this verb, even if you don't speak Italian.
Yeah.
And it's important to then understand what it does, what it means.
And the most basic way of remembering is that it's more referring to in the moment. That's why you say come stai, because you're like, in this moment, how are you feeling?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of like come sei, how are you? And this is relating to a future thing. Oh, hold that thought. We'll come back here in a second. Next one.
Scusare.
Now, I did a big diatribe on scusarsi and mi scusi, scusa, scusate. So go and check the last language video that I did, and that will explain to you basically how to ask forgiveness and say sorry and say excuse me. And just this one verb can do all three of those things.
And it's in our top verbs because we know we're going to need to use it when we're learning Italian, because we're often going to have to say,
exactly,
please excuse me, or excuse my accent, or, you know, things like that.
And I think, just a side note, if I may.
Yes.
Se posso.
Prego.
Is I think I see in the comments so many people say, oh, I understand it a lot, but I'm just afraid of speaking. And I think the the mentality that one could approach things with is just to think, this isn't your mother tongue, this isn't your mother language. So there's no need to feel inadequate or inferior or stupid, because you're not stupid. You're learning a second language that you didn't grow up with, and you're learning it as an adult, which is really hard. So it doesn't, you don't have to feel bad if you're stumbling, if you're saying something that's really difficult for Italian to comprehend. You're making an effort, and most people in the world, the majority not in the world, many people in Europe speak 6 languages, but let's just say in English-speaking countries, it is quite rare to learn a second language. So good for you that you're even trying, and don't feel shy.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Keep going. Avere.
To have.
To have. So important, this verb.
Yes, like yes, but if you just said your favourite was stare, you've got to try it.
I have 2 favourites.
Okay, they're all our favourites, but avere is extra important because unlike in English where we could just say I am hungry or I am thirsty or I have
Fear.
What? Oh, bravo, yeah.
Yeah, paura.
Yeah, bravo, exactly. Yeah. I am scared. You would say I have fear, I have hunger, I have thirst, or I have voglia, I have a want, a desire. And so
I have age, like years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's used in a different way as have in English. It's
already useful in English, but in Italian it just becomes fondamentale.
Yeah, piacere. Again, very different to English. How you say you like something.
Exactly. And again, I've done a whole video on this one verb. That's how much I believe it's important to you in your language journey. Also because generally when you're starting off with meeting people, you're going to be asked questions like this. Do you like this? Would you like some more?
I like this. I don't like this. It's also similar to mancare.
Yeah,
you know, the way
we were going to add that on.
Well, let's add that on as well. Piacere and mancare.
Okay.
Very important verbs.
Yeah. And the reason mancare means to miss. But again, in Italian, it's so much more than just miss. You can say, oh, I miss you, or I've missed Italy. But you can also say, mancano 2 minuti, there's 2 minutes until the train leaves. And so this is a different thing to get your head around, but it's certainly something that you use all the time. Or in which other case there's a...
People might say things to like, cosa ti manca, what are you missing from the table? Like, and what do you need? Instead of saying, what do you need, what are you missing?
Yeah. Nothing.
Yes.
Here in this hammock, I'm missing
what else
nothing.
do we need? A glass of water?
Yeah, magari.
Number 5, make your world Italian.
Next up, we just had a water break.
I've wet the whistle. All right, my next big tip is to immerse yourself as much as you can in the language. So for me, what I did was turn my phone into Italian, just through settings, very easy to do. Well, I'm come from Australia. We have SBS, or in Italian, SBS Italiano. And I listen to the news each morning if I had time. Also driving, I'd put SBS radio on. And I did not often understand it. And this is where you have to be careful not to let yourself get scared of how...
Non avere paura.
Non avere paura, because it's more about picking up the cadence and the musicality, which you'll go into shortly. Also putting on the sottotitoli on your Netflix, your everything you watch, so basically your favourite shows, you'll hear the English and see the Italian subtitles underneath. They're not always 100% accurate. Have you found that? However, then swapping it the other way around and listening to an Italian film and putting the English subtitles at the bottom can also really help pick up the way certain phrases that we use in English are different in Italian, or vice versa.
And I think, I don't know if I've said this in a previous video, but it's always good to watch your favourite film that's in English with the Italian subtitles, if you can find it, because then you already know what they say. You know, the real classic where you can almost recite the dialogue, and then
The Little Mermaid.
okay, yeah. Is that your? But we were
The
talking.
Thingamy-Bob.
I was thinking about The Sound of Music.
Yeah. There's so many films.
But and then because then what happens is you can say, oh right, that's how you would translate that phrase, because it's not always just a direct thing, and then you can focus on the Italian without having to follow the plot. I think if you're trying to follow a plot and read the subtitles, and you might get a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One more point. With the phone, I remember I said to a friend once, so she was even living in Italy, and she said, oh, you've got your phone in Italian and my computer as well. She said, but how do you understand? And the thing is, that's something you're using every day, so you will work it out, and you're so familiar with it. You're so familiar with where to go almost sort of intuitively. And so then you'll start seeing that word, and you'll start seeing, instead of messages, messaggi, or
Carico.
Or
another one. Annulla.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you're seeing those little words again and again, it's just that lovely having Italian in the background. And I think the key to immersing yourself is not thinking that you have to translate everything, but just having Italian in your life, in your day.
Even the maps, if you use navigation in your car.
Oh my gosh, that's advanced. Yeah.
If you're going somewhere that you know off by heart and you actually aren't paying attention, it can be really helpful, because
that's a great idea.
You'll hear la seconda uscita, the second exit.
So if you're just going to a supermarket that you know the way to, that's perfect.
Yeah, really good idea.
Bravissimo.
But it's really good to hear the music and cadence of this language.
Are you giving me a segue?
I'm trying to give you a segue.
I got it. Okay, next tip.
Number 6, open your ears to the music.
Musicality. Now, this is going to make me sound a bit weird, but when I confided in what I do, Brian was like, I do that too. So look, it's worked for us. So, but what I find myself doing, and this has always been the way, maybe because I relate to things musically, I think, but I will go out in the street. I even remember my first holiday in Italy when I didn't speak the language, and I would go home and I would hear the phrases. And even when I got to an advanced stage with my Italian, I would go home and I would hear a phrase. Maybe I'd just been in the queue in the supermarket and I'd heard someone say, non ce la faccio più. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Like it's not just the rhythm, but sometimes it's even literally the melody. You can hear. Don't laugh.
No, I'm hearing other things I've heard. But it's so true.
And the thing is that
una bella domanda.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But and sometimes I feel like, look, I've already said I'm not fluent, but I do get a lot of the time. I've had a lot of Guido's friends and things say, "Oh, are you Italian? Are you Italian?" And I've got to a point now where with my accent, they don't say, "Oh, you're Australian" or "you're British" or something. But I think it's because I'm always listening to the cadence, the inflection, and I go home. And this is so weird, but I'll just be like cooking dinner and chopping, and I'll be repeating that little lyric over and over again, and just listening to it. Like I think if you listen out, are you blocked by the shirt? Oh no, you're not. I think if you listen out for it, you'll start hearing it, and that's the difference. Sometimes I've had friends, or even when I've seen my parents learn, and they'll repeat a phrase that I've said, "Oh, this is super useful," and I'll hear them repeat it, and I'll be like, "What's wrong with that? Why is it not working? Or why, when they use it with a gisto, is he not understanding?" And then I'll realize it's the inflection, and they're not. You can learn it basically like you would a song, and because most phrases, of course, they vary a little bit in terms of which context you use it in. But if you were to say,
Da quand'è che sei in Italia? Da quand'è che sei in Italia?
Da 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 da. If you just look at it like that, da 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 da, da quand'è che sei in Italia, and often
circa 6 mesi.
No, because you don't have the visa for that.
That's right.
But a lot of the times Italians will look at me and say, how did you pick that up? But I will go home and hear it over in my head, and I will practice it. And you might say, okay, but that's in Italy. But I would do the same when I was learning Italian back in Australia. I would do the same with watching a film. I would pause it and I would just listen to the musicality in a phrase and notice, identify when someone uses the same, different characters use the same phrase.
When you're learning phrases and you end up saying it correctly once, you've probably done the cadence correctly.
Yeah.
And it'll click in your brain and you'll go, that's why I've not been getting it. And now I understand why I'm getting it. Because it'll roll off your tongue effortlessly, which Italian always should.
Yeah. And I think I've seen some expats with Italian, like we've had a lunch or something, and they struggle with Italian, and I mean, we have this friend, and I could hear her speaking to Italians, and they were like, "Che?" And they didn't understand, and she was saying the perfect phrase. She had all the words correct, the order correct, but she wasn't saying it with that musicality. She wasn't, the cadence and inflection was just off. And I think that if you just open your ears to that, suddenly you'll be exposed to a whole new way to approach Italian, and that really helps. And almost the opposite is true. You could get the words wrong and the order wrong, but if it sounded like, che caldo oggi, and you're like, da 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 da.
Exactly.
Totally agree.
Number 7, think in Italian.
So next one is
Thinking in the language.
forget English.
Forget it. I used to always be like writing to school, for example, when I was learning my first language, Indonesian. And as I thought that, I would make myself say it, or in my head, in that language. So that's what I'm trying to, what helps me is if I'm looking over there at that tree, I will say that to myself as a thought in Italian.
No, exactly. And or even if you're washing up and you're just saying to yourself, un piatto, un bicchiere. So, and
the
you're
vocab just, really good.
And saying it out loud, even if you're just alone and no one's there to correct you, I think it helps to hear your voice, and that helps you gain confidence in getting your mouth around all the R's and the pronunciation. Yeah. And
it also means you're not being lazy, because it's so much easier to think in English. But if you just dedicate, I know it will be exhausting if you did it all the time, but if you dedicated the mundane parts of the day to that, like washing the dishes or lying on a hammock, then at least you're using your brain to learn the language.
The reason we say to just discard English is because if you're learning Italian and you're, Spanish or Portuguese or French or whatever, great, you've got such an advantage. But if you're learning as an English speaker, it's so hard to make that leap, because there's just this disconnect. And and so often I'll see people try and just translate from English, and instead I find I saw much more progress with my Italian when I just looked at the context and said, in this context, what does an Italian say? Not what would I say, and then translate it from English to Italian.
A good example of this is to say something is nonsensical. In English, we say that doesn't make sense. In Italian, the same phrase would be non ha senso, which is literally it doesn't have sense rather than make sense.
I'll give you an example so you understand. So we would say, for example, if Brian's an Italian signore and he says something, say something.
Ieri sera.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's another thing. And I say, I don't understand. If I was in this moment, I would say, I don't understand. But in Italian, you would say, I haven't understood, which would be non ho capito. So you could say non capisco, but like it's more common to hear non ho capito. Non ho capito.
I haven't understood.
Yeah, or I didn't understand. But in the past, well, you were saying that it happened on the other way with an Italian, no? That said...
Yeah, I was working with a girl and she said, yesterday night I went and did such and such. And I went, oh, you mean last night?
Yeah.
And she was just translating from Italian where you'd say, ieri sera, blah, 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 which means yesterday night.
Yeah.
So,
in Italian, what verb are they using? Because there's many verbs that when you look them up, you say, okay, this is what I would say in English. But do we need to levare la camicia?
Number 8, reverse Google Translate.
On the topic of translating, don't use Google Translate, but reverse it.
Yes, similar to thinking in Italian, because you want to try and come up with what you would say first. Is that what we're getting at?
Yeah, and construct the phrase in Italian, and also that's just better for your Italian. So you've got to start off, give it a try. Put your Italian into Google Translate, and then see if the English comes back correct. Yeah. And that's the way, because Google Translate's not always going to understand if you're using the voi or if you're using he, she, or whether they're masculine, feminine, or then sometimes it's just like a robot basically translating, and it doesn't sound very very natural. Yeah. But if you're much better off trying to construct the phrase yourself and then tweaking it until when you translate it to the English, it sounds correct.
And then the more you do that, the more you get better at it. Yeah. And you might have to flip it back again and just see, what if I write this in English, what will it say? Yeah. But it's such a good habit to get into, because when you start to make conversations with people, you don't have Google Translate there. Yeah. So you want to try and think about how you're going to construct the sentence accurately in Italian first.
Yeah. And I think it's about giving yourself all these little moments just on your own to not have the answer just readily available. Mm-hmm. And I would always just try and like you, I would always just try and in my day say, okay, I'm putting on I don't know, una camicia, and I'm just like, what's camicia? And then going and looking it up and adding that little vocab, then writing that little word out and post-it noting, sticking it up on your wardrobe. Mm-hmm. It sounds intense, but they do say that people who, I know a lot of people who watch this channel are retired, or my parents, for example, are always looking at how good it is for the brain to learn another language. And you can say, oh, I'm too old for this, but it's so important to keep your brain active. And even if you never get to that sort of idealized point of fluency, but you can just keep your brain really agile, that's such a worthy exercise.
Absolutely. No? The next tip.
Number 9, do a post-mortem on your errors. What was the grammatical cause of death?
We had a big discussion over breakfast or lunch, or both.
Brunch.
Yeah, brunch. And we were saying, what is it that has helped us the most?
And it just happened to me this morning. But basically, I was speaking to an Italian lady, and she said something, and I was...
Give the example of what she said. It's good.
Well, she was saying, she said... Hang on, what did she say? Hai trovato la tabaccheria ieri, or something. She said something to the words of effect of, did you find the tabaccheria yesterday?
Which is like a news agency where they sell cigarettes and things. And
I heard I was really tired. I'm going to use that as an excuse, but I heard bicchiere, as in glass. And my mind instantly went to, because I took the glass rubbish and plastics out to the...
Such a good guess.
It's a very long way, the bins, last night, and I thought maybe she was asking about that. And my point is about the post-mortem is I was completely wrong about what she had asked me, and I spent the next 20 minutes picking apart where I went wrong and what I heard, and she said... tabaccheria and ieri, very close together, which made me think bicchiere, which made me think glass. And then I'm like, you idiot, she would have said vetro if she was talking about taking out the glass. But the point is that when you make a mistake, you spend at least 20 to 25 minutes. That's what I do anyway.
Yeah, me too.
Breaking apart what went wrong, what I heard, what it meant, what I responded with, what should I have responded with.
Yeah. What was the reason that you got tripped up? You know, was it the speed or breakdown? And also notice which words Italians tend to just swallow up or join together. And I think that's the thing, is because you heard ieri and tabaccheria, and then they became together. They made bicchiere, which you know.
And you also just when you get quite advanced and you're tired maybe or not paying attention, you hear that it's past tense because you hear the oato, but you miss the very important part of hai trovato.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to hear it all again, you might have heard hai trovato. You know, so many different things, and you just have to make it up on the spot.
You've got to find where you're making the most errors, and we all have our weaknesses. For some of us, it's the speed. For some of us, it's like they struggle to find that hook, like you've got to grab onto that one word that you pick up. For others, that they're, you know, maybe you're really good at deduction, like you get that one word and you're good at deducing what the whole phrase might be. Or maybe you get thrown when they go into past tense. And I think if you have an interaction where it doesn't work, then go and write out, you know, what that whole scene and try and learn, okay, that whole interaction, those verbs, what's a different way to say that? Why did I not get when they said that? And or even if you're watching a film, you're like, why does that sound different? So then go and look into, there might be 5 different ways to say, are you tired, or did you do that? And I always find that's what really pushes me ahead with my Italian, is really examining my mistakes, or examining, they're not even mistakes, it's just when you have a delay and understanding what's causing that delay and where is your mind going that could be redirected, no?
Exactly.
And number 10, non-Italians can be useful.
The next one is...
The next tip.
It's a bit unexpected. Don't practice with an Italian. And obviously not always, but...
Sounds controversial.
Yeah, people go, what are you saying? No, obviously you want to get out and speak with an Italian, but something that can really help you and really give you the confidence is to practice with a non-Italian, because someone who's also learning Italian... Yeah. Sometimes I think you need to take the focus off understanding the person in front of you, and you need to practice more about your speaking skills. And I think sometimes when you're speaking with an Italian, you're so caught up with understanding them that you're not really getting that practice in to say, okay, I'm going to go for this phrase. And if you find another Italophile nut, which is maybe it's your spouse, maybe you've got a friend, or maybe you just go to a class and you find another person and you say, hey, let's meet up and try and speak to each other. And you can say, oh, what good is that? Because you've got the blind leading the blind. But it's not the case, because most people, the thing they struggle with when they get to Italy is being able to, on the spot, just speak the phrase and have their brain connect with their tongue quickly. When you get to the next stage, when you're sort of intermediate, then you can speak with an Italian and get that lovely back and forth. But if you sit down and try and have a conversation with an Italian and then it's just really stunted and you don't understand what they say,
we want to avoid that feeling.
You'll get really discouraged, or you might get discouraged.
Yeah. I think as well, because it's daunting to get those first conversations out.
Even with a teacher, perhaps even if you're getting a one-on-one class, sometimes you can have such trepidation because you're thinking, I don't want to make a mistake. Whereas if you're sitting down just with a friend or your grandmother or whomever, who doesn't speak Italian, that's your best time to do the dress rehearsal and start getting yourself confident with saying phrases, having a bit of a laugh about it. And then once you feel a bit more confident, then you can go to the next level, which is, you know, interacting with Italian, going into your local delicatessen, whether you know there's an Italian, and trying it. But I think if you start practicing with a non-Italian, it just gives you that confidence to really focus on getting the words out, which sounds like a small thing, but it's quite hard for a lot of people. You never know when you're about to turn a corner. Like it will feel really hard, and then one day you'll just wake up and you'll say, "Oh, this is flowing now. This is effortless." And now when I speak, I don't even think. And about how to translate. And I think you're getting to that stage as well. No,
I still have to think, sadly, but it's great when it clicks.
Yeah.
And you start to get it. But the point is, you have to put in the work. You have to be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be able to criticize yourself and also reflect on what just happened. And what I'm going to do next time.
Yeah, and face your errors.
Yes.
It's, and also just have hope. And that's the thing I think that is difficult. Oh, I remember. I remember what I wanted to say. You know what I love about learning a language?
What? Cosa dimmi?
Indovino. Yes. I love the fact that it's one of the few things in life that money can't buy.
And you don't have to spend money either to learn it.
No, and it's the great democratizer, because it's really. But if you're learning, there's no money can get you there faster. You truly have to just use your own effort and your own volition and your own sort of initiative to get yourself there. And that's why I think we really connect, because we both know how hard it is, how much blood, sweat and tears we put in, and then when you get there you feel so triumphant, and
it's priceless.
There's no shortcuts. Don't worry if you don't live here, because do you know how many foreigners I know who've lived here for 10 years and still don't speak it? So it's not actually... Exactly. Whereas, you know, you speak better than so many people I know who've lived here for a decade and have Italian...
Because that's the point, you have to work hard.
Yes! Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you like this? Give it a like.
Comment in the box.
It costs you nothing to like. And then let us know what more you'd like for Brian. He's here for a little bit more if you would like something more from him. We did consider a driving lesson with Brian in the Panda.
Yeah, I'm a good teacher.
I bet you are. So yeah, let us know if you'd like something else with Brian, and we will see you.
Alla prossima!
Excuse us.